Welcome to the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Tirapelli, bariatric sports dietitian. Today, I am so excited to welcome a fellow bariatric dietitian and colleague, Kristin Willard. Kristin is a dietitian that aims to help you simplify your eating after bariatric surgery. She focuses on doable habits to help you feel more confident in the kitchen and in life after surgery. You can find her at bariatricmealprep.com. Thank you so much for being here, Kristin. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Kim, for having me on the show. I feel like we've been talking about this forever, so it's good to actually just do this together.
Finally do the thing. I know. And I'm always excited to have on, professionals and certainly other dietitians on the podcast, because it's fun to just kind of talk nutrition shop, so to speak. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to today.
Yes, me too. Sometimes I feel like when you have more of like an online at-home business, you miss that connection with like other people and other dietitians. I know I was always really close with dietitians I worked with. So it's so good to be talking in real person or real life.
Yes, real life. Yay. Finally.
Real time, I should say.
In real time. Yes, totally. And tell us a little bit about, because, bariatric nutrition as a dietitian is a real kind of specialty area. So I would love to hear kind of your journey into how did you get into bariatric nutrition as a dietitian?
Yes, thank you for that question. Well, I didn't really learn too much about bariatric surgery or nutrition even when I was becoming a dietitian. So the schooling before you did your internship, we talked about the different procedures. I don't even think sleeve was really like that popular yet. Mostly we talked about the Roux-en-Y procedure. So I had an idea, in regards to hormones, but didn't really think much of it. And then I did my internship. And, when you do your internship to prepare to be a dietitian, there's a certain amount of hours of like supervised practice, and you get exposed to like different aspects of nutrition. And one of those was a bariatric dietitian. And she came in to our classroom and she talked about what she did as a bariatric dietitian. And she said it was the first time she felt really rewarded in what she was doing as a dietitian, because she got to see all these transformations that people were going through. And she felt like she was really able to support them in like the long term as well. And really got a lot of that intrinsic value, also in seeing their progress. And she said before that, she really felt frustrated as a dietitian because she was realizing that like diets mostly fail and that it wasn't as effective. Right. And she really appreciated being part of the bariatric community. And so I knew I wasn't going to live where I did my internship. And so I actually reached out to the bariatric surgeons that were in the local area to where I was moving to back home. And they never wrote back to me, but that was okay. Oh. So I just kind of kept it. And I was like, well, that is an area I think I would enjoy. But they never wrote back. And I wasn't super ambitious at the time to go knock on their door or whatnot. Then later I worked in the hospital and I started developing relationships in there. And I got to work with, like you did, like the education before people were discharged. And I slowly started being able to develop relationships with people that were in the bariatric community, and the position came up. And so I was like, I really want to be a part of it. So I joined. Sure. And they just kind of like started me. And I just absolutely loved having more of those relationships with people. And once again, being part of the whole transformation process from like beginning to years after surgery, and really seeing those changes that were made. One of my favorite things was that they would do a ceremony each year, really honoring the patients and like just all the different new things that they were able to do with their bodies as well, and emotional support. So it was really, really, really fulfilling to be a part of. And so that was kind of how I started. Kind of a long story to that question, but it really wasn't straightforward. It was kind of like, I felt like it's what I wanted to do, but it gradually just got there. It didn't quite have it at the beginning.
Isn't that so true, though? I was just thinking about, as I was listening to your story, when you talk to other dietitians, it's so interesting to hear folks' paths to where they end up, kind of focusing their, area of nutrition, because of course there's so many different and wonderful areas of nutrition you can focus on. And I felt the same too about bariatric, because when I first started a clinical, that was my very first job was that floor. And so I did the discharge education, and I didn't know much about bariatric surgery either. But what I didn't love about it was I felt like they just left, and I didn't get to ever see them again, And so when I took my next job after my clinical, I went into outpatient, and then I started working with approving patients basically for surgery. I was helping a surgical center here in Fresno to do all their pre-op, assessments, make sure that the folks were ready.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about that, what I liked was then I also got to see them after the surgery more. And that's kind of what really got me intrigued with this, was because I got to actually see, like you said, that colleague had, you get to see this transformation and this life change. And it is so cool to see people use the tool. And that's what hooked me, to this area.
Absolutely. Yes. And I really, enjoyed just the comfort level that I was able to create with my clients when I was in the surgery center as well. And just really see their progress. So I'm glad you had a very similar experience, it sounds like.
Totally. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, so tell me a little bit about, what are some of the biggest nutrition questions that you typically receive as a dietitian that's working with, bariatric clients? How do you address those? What are some of those big questions that you typically receive?
Yeah, well, I would have to say, hands down, the biggest question I receive is how many calories should I have?
Sure.
I feel like that is probably the number one. Second is what my carbs should be. I would say is probably second. And then also, what are just some easy recipes, kind of when that's more in conversations with people, how to get recipes. So as far as, when it comes to calories, as I'm sure you've talked about on the show, there is no one size fits all.
Totally.
So I always just feel like we have to start somewhere, and it's not actually, I should preface this that I don't recommend jumping right into calorie counting. That's definitely not a place where I start. So if someone just had surgery, or especially if they're in those first couple of years where their metabolism is still shifting and adjusting, I think it's definitely more important to really use that opportunity to start listening to your body, honoring those hunger and those fullness signals. Of course, you don't always feel hunger, so sometimes we need to override that a little bit with more of a structured plan. But learning to develop that trust with your body in that first couple of years, which I understand is challenging because it's kind of moving all the time. It's very dynamic. Now, because I always like to tell people, when it comes to calories, there is going to be a deficit. So even if your body does require, let's say 1,500 calories, you're going to be naturally getting that deficit with calories, because ultimately a calorie deficit is what's going to be helping with that weight loss. And so you're going to be getting that, whether it's 500 calories you're getting in those first couple months, or whether it's 1,000 calories, you still are going to be having that deficit, which is going to lead ultimately that weight loss. So let's focus on other things. So my main goal for post-ops after surgery is to maintain their muscle mass, as I'm sure it is for you as well, to really keep that muscle as much as possible. And the best way to do that is with protein. And I know we talk about protein so much in the bariatric community, but keeping that protein is going to be the most helpful in the long term, because I think there's this misnomer when people are losing weight, they're only thinking about the fat loss that they're having. But there's really a significant amount of muscle loss as well. And so we want to try to keep that muscle mass as much as possible. So ultimately you have a higher metabolism in the long term. So that's really why it's my goal, to be able to keep that muscle mass.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And obviously in the folks that I work with, that's our number one goal. And a lot of folks that I work with too will come back and say, I did lose, more muscle than I really wanted throughout. And that can be due to a variety of reasons. Maybe they just weren't able to tolerate more protein that they would have liked to have. It's just everyone's so different, like you said. But I really hone in on that too, which is, we want to take in the right amount of protein that you need, and that you're going to be different than anyone else out there, right? Your goals and needs are going to be individualized to you. And really just trying to enhance the muscle, because I think too, I don't know if you hear this from your clients. I will often hear, I'm a little bit scared to start weightlifting and that kind of stuff, because I don't want to see the scale number go up if I gain muscle. And it's that's good. That's a good, thing. You want the muscle. And that's kind of why I know I've talked about this previously, which is body composition measurements and things, which give us a better, fuller picture as to what's happening in our body as we proceed through this journey, But yeah, I agree with you. I hear that too. And of course, on my side, some of the biggest questions I get is, how many carbs do I need? When should I start implementing carbohydrates? When should I start kind of increasing those? And I kind of want to pick your brain on that too today. But just, because everyone's goals and needs are different, some people may stay on a lower carbohydrate diet for life, and that's okay. And some folks, as they increase their movement, they need more, and that's okay too. And so I think the biggest variety that I see is just the nutrition is really going to be reflective of what your goals are and what you're doing. I don't know. Is that kind of similar to how you look at it as well? Yeah.
I look at the carbs that they are eventually going to go up in time. And one way that I do it is I do like to look, like you can look at the macronutrient breakdown, like, 30, I would say generally, this is general terms, like 30 to 40% of calories is going to come from carbohydrates
Yep.
ultimately.
Yep.
And that number to me changes depending on someone's personal like capacity. It also depends on, what carbohydrate choices they're picking, right? So like,
Yes,
if we were to
totally.
do 40% carbohydrates, if you're choosing more like processed carbohydrates, so things
Hmm.
like crackers or chips or whatnot, like you can hit that
Yep.
40% pretty quickly. But like if we're
Right.
using more of the fruits and we're using more of like the starchy vegetables, those are ways that you can, if you have a larger capacity in your stomach and you're trying to feel satisfied, you can have those carbohydrates, and those are going to make you
Right.
feel more satisfied because of the fiber and just the ultimately the volume is gonna help you. But you don't necessarily have to be like higher calories because you're having
Right.
that higher amount of
Right.
of that carbohydrate. So we can kind of work with that a little bit, because if you're having
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
candies, you know, like a small space, and be able to fill that up really quickly, and get all your needs technically if you're having more of those processed foods.
Right. I can't tell you the number of times I'll have folks say, when someone that's like, "Hey, can you help me develop a meal plan?" and I'm working with them and they look at the plan, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't eat, the protein with all the veggies. I'm so full." And it's
Yeah.
like, but ultimately you're more full because like as you mentioned, the fiber, you're getting actually more bang for your buck when you
Yeah.
get, those whole grains, the fruits, the
Yeah.
vegetable carbohydrate sources.
Yeah.
And it is more challenging sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
that can make you feel more full, and so that's where we prioritize the protein. And
Totally.
it I think sometimes it's a mental, like a mind shift from maybe the way that was, a pattern that they had eaten differently before is now, they're kind of surprised by how much more they can really eat for calorie wise, but the
Mm-hmm.
volume is actually can be bigger in terms of you feel so much more full. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I don't know if I explained that right,
Right.
but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I get one of the biggest comments that I get, because I have a pretty engaged like Instagram following, and I feel like they're when I put,
Right.
or even TikTok, and I put pictures up of food, and like I'll say like, this is how much, what 80 grams of protein looks like in a day, and so many
Sure.
times, which is understandable, people eat, and also it's hard to understand how much food is in a picture. Sometimes it's hard to like really gauge that.
Right.
But
Totally.
one of the most common comments I get is, that's so much food, I could never eat that. Now, granted, lots of times it's from people, that just had surgery. I wouldn't expect them to be at these levels. But
Right.
I think people are surprised when I say this is like 1,000 calories roughly. Like it's really not that significant amount of calories. It's lower than,
Right.
the traditional American diet. Or like I think when you do like a diet, they say don't go lower than 1,200 calories, unless you're being followed by a medical professional or whatnot. And so I think people would be surprised that this amount of food actually is, less than that.
Absolutely.
So really going to that volume, to be able to help with that, and it's going to help more with those whole food sources. So
Yeah, for sure. And good for the long-term strategies too,
yeah.
as we're able to tolerate more food down the road. I know and I'm going to ask you this question next, which are what are some of your key nutrition strategies? But one
Yeah.
of the things that I always focus on when we first start with folks is, understanding that the nutrition bariatric basics are always the bottom of that pyramid in terms of the
Mhm.
hierarchy of importance.
Mhm.
And we can't add in my case, these sports nutrition guidelines unless we have the basics met, which is meeting your
Mm.
overall protein goals, your fluids,
Mhm.
pairing your protein with fibrous vegetables and fruits and starches, because then when we need to add in maybe more easy to digest carbohydrates and things like that,
Mhm.
if we aren't meeting those basic needs, it gets a lot more challenging to layer on these other things.
Yeah.
And so in my area, that's why I want to hear from you too, but I really focus as a main nutrition strategy is we still have to make sure that the bariatric basics are met first.
Mhm.
Then we go to being more specific on calories and carbs and timing
Right.
and protein and all these
Right.
things.
Right.
What are some of the nutrition strategies that you really, hone in on with your clients, right out of the gate or even down the road?
Mhm. Yeah, so it sounds we probably have similar approaches. So I want to,
Yeah.
I always know these kind of, I think we were having a conversation before that, sometimes these could be a little bit boring. Like they're just not really like, oh,
Right.
yes, I got to try that. But I think the more you hear
Right.
them, the more, yeah, they resonate with you, and you can find new ways to, to do them if they haven't worked for you in the
Right.
past. But definitely I focus on protein first. So like kind of like that bottom of the period that you said,
Yeah.
depending on where someone's at, like if they just had surgery, or even if they're within that first year, it's using a protein supplement, no problem doing that. Even if you're farther out, like there's no shame in using protein supplements to help meet your protein goals.
I
Um,
agree.
where I kind of steer away from the protein drinks is when someone's telling me they're hungry all the time. And
Yeah.
so that's where I'm like, okay, well, the protein drinks probably aren't really satisfying you. So like, let's shift over to more of those whole food sources of protein if we can.
Yeah.
More like the animal proteins would be like chicken, tuna, turkey, beef. I have no problem with beef. I know some, I think as part of the varied diet. I don't like even with
Yeah.
chicken. Like I don't like to see chicken every single meal. I don't like to see beef
Right.
every single meal. I like to see variety also within the
Yeah.
protein types, so you don't get burnt out
Yeah.
on it. And each one kind of provides you with a little slightly different nutrient profile.
Right.
And so having a variety there, general terms, is like 3 to 4 ounces typically of these protein sources, and
Yep.
aiming to have that first, especially if you are really trying to get the basics down, or if you just kind of want like a
Mhm.
restart. Measuring out your protein in the beginning, I think, can be really helpful, so you have an idea of what a certain amount of protein even looks like. Now, granted,
Right.
you can, develop, as time goes on, more of like layered foods, like foods that like are kind of like, they're not just, okay, I have my protein over here and my vegetable and my carb. They're kind of more mixed.
Yeah.
You can, work with that with time. And I think in the beginning, it's really helpful just to have that measured ounces of protein.
Yep.
Focusing on that first, and then focusing on the vegetables. So more of a
Yep.
fiber, I like dark leafy greens. I mean, those are going to be like
Okay.
and I'm coming from more of a nutrition standpoint, that I think you're going to get the best bang for your buck with like dark leafy greens. So that's spinach,
Yep.
kale, broccoli. Cauliflower is not a dark
Yep.
leafy green, but the cruciferous
Yeah.
vegetables I think are really good. Focusing on that vegetable, and then if you still have the space for it, having in that carbohydrate
Yeah.
portion of it. When it comes to, I think like some people do need more carbs, then like if they get full by the time they get to that. And that's where I like to
Right.
see the carbs come in with like the snacks, for me personally,
Yep.
snacks, and then pairing it with protein, if, to help balance the blood sugars, and also
Absolutely.
prevent like, more of a slider effect with different foods.
Yeah.
Slider, I don't even talk about that, but like when the food just kind of goes
Yes.
through you really quickly and you're not
Right.
satisfied from it. So that protein's going to help. Just wanted to clarify for people that might be a new term.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my strategy there. It's not super fancy. It's pretty standard, all in all. But what I think is more different about working with like me or a dietitian more one-on-one is that this sounds straightforward until you do it. And
Right.
sometimes there can be challenges along the way. Maybe there's certain proteins you don't tolerate. Maybe you're just not getting that, you're not feeling satisfied like with just vegetables and carbs, or sorry, vegetables and protein, and you can't get to your
Right.
carbs. So you want to work through that because you're like, I just want to eat, something later because I didn't feel satisfied with this meal. So like, let's make this meal more, more balanced for you, because it's more than
Right.
just nutrition. Sometimes it's like we have like, different emotional components that can come along with it too. So working with a
So true.
dietitian, I think, can be really helpful on navigating that, because it's simple. It sounds simple, but it does have its challenges as well.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. And then that paired with getting your fluids in throughout
Oh
the
gosh,
day.
yes,
And yeah,
yes.
and then just nutrient variety, quality, like you're saying. I think sometimes
Hmm.
it's like, I mean, gosh, yeah, I could eat chicken and broccoli and then I'm going to have my brown rice or quinoa. And it's like after like a month of that, you're like, I know I'm done
Yeah,
with this,
yeah,
And I think that I agree. I think when you work with a dietitian, you can certainly just learn, what else is out there, and
yeah,
and maybe some new cooking methods that you haven't
yeah,
tried before, some new
yeah.
recipes, things like that. And that kind of leads me into what I was going to ask you next too, which is I know in your business, Bariatric Meal Prep, you
Hmm.
really focus a lot of your education and things on, the importance of meal prepping, meal planning,
Hmm.
just helping others to find simple and easy ways to meet their needs
Yeah,
after bariatric surgery. Tell us a little bit about why you've honed in on that specific area in terms of the
yeah.
importance of meal prepping or meal planning. Can you tell us a little bit about why you feel that that's a beneficial thing to really focus on?
Absolutely. I definitely have my focus has really also come from working with like my community and audience as well. So seeing
Hmm.
what people have found the most helpful is kind of where
Yeah.
I have tried to serve that in the community as well. So it's definitely not been like my plan from the beginning to focus always on meal prepping and meal planning, but I found that people feel like that's where I offer the most value to them. So I kind of lean into that. As
Sure.
far as so I like to focus on visuals and try to make kitchen and meal prep as simple as possible. And where that originally started was when I did work in the bariatric clinic, we would do like group settings. And so you have to reach, a certain amount of classes or a certain amount of nutrition visits, within 6 months. And so we would have these, almost daily that people could choose, to come in on the hour that worked for them. And anyhow, we were just teaching in a classroom and I had like a PowerPoint slide and I felt like I was like, yeah, you need 3 to 4 ounces of protein. And it was like, okay, like what does that really mean? You need 20 to 30 grams. Like, but then, as far as like the visuals, I felt like that was really lacking. And that was before I took pictures or did anything. And so then when I started seeing clients at home, online, I started my Instagram page. And sorry, was that a beep that came through here? Oh, I have my computer. Okay.
No, you're good.
So I started my Instagram page and I did a simple picture and I think it was just like a chicken drumstick. And then I said, first step, chicken drumstick, and it was like 3 to 4 ounces. And then second step was there was some sort of vegetable in there, like a carrot or a green bean. And then I added that in. And then I added, then your fiber containing carb. I think I called it a smart carb at the time because my language has changed with time as well.
Sure.
And like that picture like blew up. And I just remember being like, whoa, like people really want to see these visuals. This is what people find the most helpful. So like I said earlier, I leaned into that and then tried to break stuff down like as simple as possible so that it was approachable. Because I think you see these, and I was kind of embarrassed in my pictures at first, but I also, because they weren't like these professional, you looked at Instagram at the time, at least was much more like curated and like these beautiful pictures of everything. And I remember like, yeah, this picture doesn't look, like these beautiful bloggers pictures, but I think they were relatable. And I think that's what helped people actually appreciate my stuff at first, was that this was like, okay, I can do this. Okay. Yeah. Some cottage cheese and some, cherry tomatoes with some black pepper. I can do that. I can do some, slow cooker chicken with some salsa in it and, add into a lettuce wrap. So I feel like I made it approachable and that's what has worked to be able just to try to really, because I think your confidence builds as you make these small steps. And so we have to make these small steps so that you can also build your confidence in yourself. Because that's really what's the most important to help, someone continue to come on this journey, because there can be challenges along the way. And really just kind of going back to that self-belief that this is something you can do, I think is the most important.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, your account was one of the first I followed. Like when I opened up my business, I was like, okay, I need to start putting things on Instagram and, establishing a social media account. Cause as you can probably relate, being from clinical to owning your own business is like completely a new world. Yeah. And I was like, okay, let me just see what other dietitians are doing. And I love all of your posts and information because, again, they're easy to digest. They're relatable. They're just like, hey, this is what this amount of protein looks like. Or here's a quick way to make a protein, a veggie, and a starch, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think you're so right. I think a lot of times when we, come out of the surgical education, so to speak, like your clinical setting education, it's just a lot of kind of a pictures or just a packet. And you're like, okay, here you go. And the person leaves and they're like, how do I actually put this into action?
Yeah, I got this packet. Okay, now what?
Yes. Now what?
There's no pictures.
Yeah. It's just 3 ounces of meat, 1/2 cup of starch, 1/2 cup of cooked veggie, 1 fruit, 1 dairy, and because I know that that's what we did where I was, had been. And that's what I really appreciate about your information is it's real food, it's real, real life application. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of that missing link that people really need, which is, okay, I know I'm supposed to have 3 ounces of chicken or protein, whatever. I know I'm supposed to have a vegetable and a fruit. What sounds good, what looks good, and then finding alternatives to your personal food preferences and, making that work. And do you feel like meal planning, meal prepping, because of course, and this is a whole nother, I don't even want to open this Pandora's box, but
let's do it.
Let's do it. But meal planning and, or, getting into the whole tracking and all these things are debatable in terms of some people like it, some people don't. And I'm not saying there's a pro or con, well, I shouldn't say there is pros and cons to each, I should say. What have you found to be helpful when you are working with folks in terms of meal planning? Maybe not necessarily calorie tracking or anything like that, but how have you found that teaching folks how to kind of balance each meal has helped them to stay on track, for example?
Yeah. So one of my foundational properties is creating what I call an ideal schedule. I think it can be really helpful just to write out, and you can work with your dietitian on this, like rough, because you think, okay, so 60 to 80 grams of protein per day. Okay, if
Right.
you can only handle 15 grams of protein of solid food at a time, how is that going to break down? Like, how many times a day are you going to be needing to eat in
Yep.
order to reach that?
Yep.
And so, say like it's 4 times. So having an idea what times you're going to be eating at, and roughly how much protein you think that you're going to need, I think can be a helpful starting point,
Yep.
just to feel like you have a plan going into the day. Now, I always just like to, clarify with everyone that this doesn't mean that you have to do this exact thing at the exact time. Like, life happens. Like, it's important to also remain flexible, but you are
Yep.
at least starting off with this intention, and then it may need to like change a little bit. You may miss the bus at a certain step and catch the next bus, as you're
Yeah.
going along. So trying to remain flexible with that. For me personally, even, I think it's really helpful to have a plan each week on roughly what your dinners are going to be. I think having a
Yep.
plan, it doesn't have, you don't even have to say like Monday I'm having this, Tuesday I'm having this. Like, for me
Right.
personally, I tend to plan like 4 entree sort of meals a week, and then
Yep.
I have like maybe 2 kind of grab and go sort of lunches I can use, and then like I really only rotate like a few breakfasts. Like, I pretty much eat like really similar meals. I'm nothing fancy with that. And
Sure.
so I think most people tend to stick to the same breakfast. And then when you're tired of something, like
Yeah.
just
Change
get
it up.
something else, change it up.
Yeah.
Still try to look to see if it's with a protein, but like you can stick with something, for as long as you are happy with it. And so then
Right.
going into it each week, and then one thing that I think is also helpful is continuing to use the same recipes. So you don't have to have like new recipes like every single week and trying something new. Like, the more you do cook the same meals, the more you're not going to need the recipe. You're just going to have it in your head. When you go to the grocery store,
Right.
you're not going to necessarily always need a shopping list. It's good to have those, like, don't get me wrong, but like you
Right.
can be a little bit more fluid with it. You can just kind of be more adaptable the more you practice the same recipes. And then once you get tired of
Sure.
it, try a new one, and then try to use that one more
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
Does that answer
Yeah, I
the
couldn't
question?
agree. Yeah, no, totally. I was going to say, I like to do, I'm similar to you. I have 3 kids, and we all are doing sports every night
Yeah.
until, 8 or 9 at night. And so I try to do that too. Like, on Sundays, I go to the store and I'll buy like, I know I'm going to have chicken one night. I'm going to have pork chops one night. We're probably going to do spaghetti one night, and we're going to do tacos. That's kind of
Yeah.
my rotation. And
Yeah.
like you said, I think that that's such an important thing, which is the flexibility. When you
Mhm.
have the proteins at home, you can, what sounds good today? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Maybe usually it's Taco Tuesday, but like everyone's like, I'm so sick of Taco Tuesday. Can we
Yeah.
just do some chicken or pork or ground
Yeah.
turkey or something like that?
Yeah.
And having those protein sources at the house, then I can just go, yes, I'm not doing tacos this week. You know what we're going to
Yeah.
do instead? We're going to make ground turkey with some vegetables, and we're going to
Yeah.
do like a stir fry type of
Yeah.
thing, and just try to mix it up. So, but I think that
Mhm.
what makes it easy is just having those variety of proteins at the house. And then, as like you're saying, as you get more seasoned in terms of practicing like different things that have worked in the past, then you can
Mhm.
easily switch and move things around if you
Mhm.
have it at home.
Mhm. Exactly. And like you can switch out. I think and it kind of goes back to like that all or nothing. Sometimes we can get into this all or nothing thinking as well. So
Right.
sometimes I see like, if there's like a vegetable in a recipe that you don't have, sometimes it can be like, oh no, I can't do this recipe because I don't have this option. So
Yeah.
like getting comfortable with like, okay, what other vegetable could I replace it with? And
Yeah.
I'm actually in the middle of like a meal prep challenge right now in my program. That's what we've been doing this week, as far as like, okay, your challenge this week is to switch out, a vegetable with another vegetable, or a protein with another protein, right? It doesn't always have to
Right.
be chicken. You could maybe have some pork with it instead, or, the ground
Yeah.
turkey or something, or a thing. So like trying to not feel like you're structured to these exact recipes also, I think can be really helpful. But it takes time. Like, I think
It
cooking is a
does.
skill set. Meal prep is absolutely a skill set. And so you're not just going to be like, oh, I want to be good at cooking and be good at cooking. Like, it's going to take, or
Right.
good at planning. Like, I mess up all the time.
Yeah,
And so,
totally.
still, but I learned from it, really what's the lesson in this, and then apply it to the next one.
Yeah. And I think that that's such an important skill I'll just kind of hone in on too, which is, as you get farther out from when you had your surgery, you're going to learn what you tolerate, what you like,
Mhm.
maybe things that you used to like before you don't like anymore. And so now it's like, oh gosh, scratch that. Or even sometimes there's just a day where you're like, this is stuff I normally eat and feel great with. And then there are days you're like, this made me feel terrible. Like, you know what I mean? And adjusting kind of on the fly. And
Mhm.
I think it's just kind of a skill set that just develops over time, and it takes practice, and And I get a lot of folks, right out of the gate, and it can be frustrating. It can be, challenging. But just give yourself some time, because it's
Yeah.
going to get better,
Yeah.
and learning, and folks like you who have wonderful resources online that people can look at and go, oh, that looks good, and I can try that today, and give it a shot. You never know.
Yeah, I definitely try to like always use recipes that like and ingredients that you could find like anywhere.
Yes.
Walmart is
Yes.
actually like my go-to as far as like shopping, because I feel like for
Yeah.
the recipes that I do online, because I feel like Walmart's everywhere. So if you can find it at
Yeah.
Walmart, it's likely a familiar ingredient that you can use in your own
Yeah.
cooking.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And let's talk a little bit more now. So I want to dive into the carbohydrate debate,
Okay.
is
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that you and I get lots of questions on. So of course, like I said, obviously I work with folks that are, have specific movement and fitness goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're
Mm-hmm.
naturally their carbohydrate needs over time from when they had their surgery are going to likely increase to match what their body is needing for, their fitness and training goals.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you advise when someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to start incorporating a little bit more carbohydrate? Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy? Is how do you start with, giving them some basic examples on carbohydrate rich foods, or how do you increase them over time? What's some of the advice that you give out to your clients?
Yeah. So to be honest, I don't know if anyone's ever come to me and said, I want to increase my carbohydrate intake. I get like more like, is it, because I'm not specifically in the athletic community. So most people feel like, want to reduce their carbohydrates.
Right. True.
And so I talk, I like to always start off with like, where are you at already? Is there, how much are you taking in? Because you can really only make changes once you have a baseline of where somebody's already at. And then depending on what their goals are. So like if they're feeling like they're not satisfied, after meals, once the protein is in place and they have some vegetables on there, or like, let's even say that they don't like vegetables. Let's just say like, I don't want those. I would look at to be like, what my go-to first would probably be like a starchy vegetable, like as far as like, can we put some butternut squash in there? Can we put some, peas in there, some black beans with your chicken? When you do like a salsa chicken, can you add some black beans to it? So, I would say when someone needs a higher volume to like kind of feel more satisfied, then I look more to the starchy vegetables. And the reason why is because they tend to just have more nutrients than like, let's say like long grain brown rice or bread. There's nothing inherently wrong with those. But with the smaller capacity, I feel like you get the best bang for your buck with starchy vegetables. If those are going good, then I like to add in they can have like more of the starch, so like the quinoa or the long grain brown rice, and even like like I know maybe I even shouldn't say this, but like if you have like because I feel like you need like one-on-one. I feel like there's prefaces to this, but what I'm about to say, but like pasta, like when you look at like for the amount of that pasta that someone can have, if it's a regular pasta versus like a whole grain pasta, the nutrient difference is really not that significant to me for the small fourth of a cup to half a cup that they're having. I think those, so if someone tells me I really don't like those whole grain pastas, like I'm usually okay with, having one of these other pastas, especially if we're pairing it with a protein, for the overall meal. So then I would go there. When it comes to fruits, like I love fruits. I think those are a great source of carbohydrates. And I tend to use those more for snacks because I feel like they're grab and go. You could totally use them in a meal. Totally can be a carbohydrate choice in the meal. But I tend to put the fruits also into snacks for people. With someone specifically working out, I tend to also like do the fruit for someone that is, and you may have a different approach because this is like specifically your specialty, but I tend to put the carbohydrates, the simple ones more like the fruits into the pre-snack or the pre-workout snack,
100%,
to be able to have that energy for when they actually work out.
So 100%.
When it comes to the grams, like how many grams, I don't have, once again, depends on the capacity. But I would say like most people that like aren't like strictly working out, I would say 75 to 120 tends to be where people are at. And then if someone's really active, I would say, 150. They may even need more like macronutrient wise, like if you do like those calculations, but because of their limited capacity, they may just have a hard time being able to get to that high. And I've heard that you can, and you know this, like as far as like your body adapts like to those lower carbohydrate, because 150 is still like a low carbohydrate diet in my opinion.
It is, 100%.
Especially if you're an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, in the kind of the sports nutrition world, like we would generally calculate carbs off of gram per kilogram, just like we do for protein calculations. But because this is the bariatric, group, it's going to be more challenging to meet those carbohydrate goals when you're having to focus on protein food first. And so a lot of times what I do in terms of my philosophy with it is, like you said, I always start with where they're at. And I say, okay, how much are we taking in right now? And I also relate it, of course, to how they're feeling in their workouts, how they're recovering. Are they able to keep pushing themselves in their workouts? And what I typically will do is incrementally start with 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate, at a meal. Try to, add that in if we can. And sometimes folks just need that additional pre-workout carbohydrate, like you're mentioning, some fruit, and I'll focus in on those easy to digest, like sources like applesauce or like a banana or something that's going to just be quick and easy and light, that they don't feel like it's, sitting in there and, bothering them when they go to work out. But that carbohydrate pre-workout is important. But like you're saying, I do the same thing. It's, you can't just say, yeah, this is the recommendation. You need 200 grams of carbs. And they're looking at you like, listen, I can barely get my protein goals in. Now you're asking me to, you know what I mean? You can't do it. And so I think the best advice, that it sounds like you and I are both on the same pages, is you have to start with where someone's at. And then where can we make some changes first? How does that make you feel? And then we go from there. And if we can go more, great. If we can't, then we hold there and we see how that goes. That's kind of my philosophy on it.
Exactly. And I like to keep, I encourage people to write down with usually your approach, you're trying to get their performance better, trying to get their activity level, better, where many people that I work with tend to also want to reduce sugar cravings at night, or they're just feeling really low energy. And so I encourage people to monitor that. So I look at my role as the guide, but you are your own teacher. And so I can guide you with these decisions, but it's really up to you to listen to your body and notice how that affected you, and then choose for yourself on whether or not this is something that is going to that's helpful for you. Me just telling you that having, carbs at every meal is going to be helpful for your energy. If you don't actually experiencing that, then that's not true. You need to experience 100%. That in order, even though the science may say it. I feel like everyone, we are individuals and there's no one size fits all. And so come back to me. Let me know. We put carbs in each meal. Okay. How is your energy level doing? How is your, cravings at nighttime, which cravings, I think we both know, can come from a variety of different things, but that's just, one area that we can look at, and then we can make tweaks if necessary. One thing that I do preface to people when they start adding in carbohydrates is that there is likely going to be a couple pound weight gain in the beginning until just to recognize that this is water weight and it's not fat. But I think it helps people to prepare mentally, knowing that's going to happen. Because I think when you don't get that information, they think, oh, it's not working for me, and they don't want to do it. But if you kind of preface it,
100%.
This is what's going to happen.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. I probably have that conversation on the daily. And just because obviously in my group, I will, we talk about, the carbohydrate is going to increase your glycogen stores, which is that stored carbohydrate in the muscle. And that draws water in. And it's a heavy product, so to speak. And so it does, when you jump on the scale, it's like, oh my gosh, you're not doing anything wrong. You're fueling your body properly. Of course, as you know, there's so many other reasons why we might see the number increase, but you're absolutely right. And I think prefacing that is helpful so that it's not carbs are bad. I saw the number on the scale. No, carbs are an energy source that, fuel your body to do all different things, just to live, your brain is especially. And so it's okay, where it gets kind of okay now, we need to look at is if it's trending upward, then it's okay, well, let's take a look and see what's going on. There might be something else that we need to address, and it's not the carbohydrate. We just have to look at what's going on. It's the full picture.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's the trend over time and not just a week. We have to look at, I would say at least 3 weeks to a month to really understand. And I think there's higher expectations for weight loss when we start a new diet. I think culture wise is 2 pounds a week. And especially for someone that has had weight regain, I think it's unrealistic to maybe that first week, because you're maybe making major changes there. There might be a 2 pound weight loss, but I think a 2 pound weight loss every week is really not realistic. And agree. So the reason why I'm saying this also is because as we were just saying, our weight shifts also. So sometimes it can be really hard to see those changes in your weight when you're only looking at 1 week at a time, because it's natural to have those ups and downs. So when you keep it over time, you can actually see what's going on, because those little increases are more normal, or fluctuations, totally. I should say.
Part of it. Yeah. Part of it. Absolutely. And so I know we kind of both talked on this, but I just want to hit on it because I get this question a lot, which is, what are some of the, your favorite carbohydrate rich foods that you like to put into like the recipes or the things? I know you've mentioned some, but are there any other besides, the ones that you've mentioned?
So no, definitely like legumes, I think are like my favorite source. And then I like potatoes. Like I know sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. Like I think those get a bad rap that have like lots of potassium in them, and I just feel like they just make a meal feel complete to me sometimes when you have them in there. And filling. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then fruits, definitely. I feel like those are, the great go-tos. I felt like there was something else I was going to add. Oh, quinoa. And that was nutrient dense. But one of the reasons why I also do it is because sometimes people just can't tolerate pastas or breads. And so that can be one that's, in my experience working with clients, more tolerated than other ones. Yeah. I do use the low carb tortillas for my recipes, like a lot. However, like I only really do that online because I get so many like questions, like if I don't use, or like kind of like shaming if I don't use like a regular tortilla, or if I do use a regular tortilla. Right. So I stick to the low carb one, but that's not necessarily, I think someone can have like the regular, like, tortillas. Is more about like if you're farther out and you like that better and you tolerate it. It's really about the overall picture of the day and not just like that carbo or that tortilla in itself. And so
I was gonna say, I couldn't agree with you more on that because I think we get overly focused on like one meal. It's like, she had a whole wheat tortilla. And it's like, oh my gosh, it was. And it was 16 carbohydrates and that's okay. It's, and in my case too, I have found with folks that do struggle with either cravings later in the evenings, it's because their meals throughout the day weren't as balanced as they could be. And sometimes a whole grain tortilla is awesome. Like you're saying, like, and some people like the low carb tortillas and they taste good and they feel good and that's okay too. You have to find what works for you. You know what I mean? And the whole shaming thing out there. And I know you and I could go on this forever, but like, gosh, it's so unfortunate because a lot of it comes from a place of, not even accurate, evidence-based information, first of all. But secondly, I just feel like, what works for one person isn't going to work for everyone else. And that's okay. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be you shouldn't be judging someone else's intake or how much they're eating or what they're eating because of your journey. Like, great, that's your journey. This person over here, by the way, is running a half marathon in 2 weeks. Did you know that? No, you didn't. That's why they're eating a whole grain tortilla. You know what I mean? And it's like, I get so flustered with that.
Oh my gosh, I know. And words have power. And so like sometimes 100%. They can be really triggering. And I think some people really do come from a place of well-meaning, but just not understanding that it could really just make someone not feel good and kind of spiral a little bit with comments like that. Cause I think everyone is really just doing the best that they can. And with what they have, cause you never know what someone's going through. So
that's so true. That's so true. And speaking of that, so what are some of the key mindset shifts that you like to focus on when you're working with your clients? Are there any, obviously you're focusing mostly on the nutrition and those types of things, but are there mindset shifts or things that you kind of share with folks to like, hey, expect this, or you might think of it this way? Are there any that you recommend or kind of say to your clients?
Yeah. So I really encourage people to like pause, like when I think that's the first step towards things, is like when they're noticing that they're having negative thoughts or that they like getting, I shouldn't do this, or what's wrong with me. Really taking a step back and pausing first, because you can get into that spiral. Because a lot of time, like I really go off that, like the cognitive behavioral theory, where it's kind of the think, feel, do cycle. I've heard some people talk about it, where your thoughts, you have a thought, right? And it's not true necessarily, but it's just a thought that you have. But the more you believe that thought, it becomes a belief, right? And beliefs are like really hardcore, ingrained in us and really hard to change. So noticing when something actually is a thought or a belief, or whether it's actually true or not. Like, I feel gross today or something like that. Like that's like not real, that's just a belief. It's just a thought. It's not really true. And so those create your feelings, and then your feelings create your actions, and your actions create your results. And a lot of times I call it, I want to give credit where credit is due. Joanna Lindenbaum, she is a coach that I've worked with, and she talks about the wheel of self-sabotage. And so when you're having these kind of self-sabotaging thoughts, that it's the wheel where it's going to eventually, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I
Right.
really try to encourage more of like the wheel of self-growth, where, okay, we're noticing that thought, you're pausing, you're noticing you're having that. What thought can we have, or can you tell yourself instead to help, have these more positive feelings? So like, for
Right.
instance, like, like I just did the meal prep challenge. That's kind of fresh in my mind. So like a thought could be, I messed up. I'm never going to get this. This is never
Right.
going to work for me, this meal prepping, which is going to make you feel like bad and like defeated. And then you're not going to do it. Like, you're not going to want to continue it. And that's resulting in like, yeah, you never get it, because we had this kind of this negative thought to begin with, where we can kind of
Right.
switch that and say, I messed up, but I'm learning, and this is a process. And then that kind of gives you more of the feeling of feeling hopeful and
Right.
determined. And that can lead you to,
Yep.
I'm going to try again. And then that results you
Yep.
in learning how to meal prep. And,
Right.
I know that can seem a little like woo sometimes, a little fake. Like, I can't just like talk myself into this, but
Right.
I like to stop. I like to stop at that point and say, if that feels uncomfortable for you, then changing it to more, I believe in the possibility that I can do this, so it's
Yeah.
kind of always like a dynamic, always changing process. And you
Right.
never are a meal prepper. Like, you can change. If you stop meal prepping the next week, you're not a meal prepper. So like, I'm becoming a
Right.
meal prepper. Like, I'm becoming
That's
this,
right.
as opposed to
Yeah.
like, I am this,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
hopefully that answers
And I
your
think,
question on mindset. Cause
yeah,
I feel
no,
like you can really get
100%.
into it.
You really can. I mean, and I, as just, it's an area that I've been trying to learn, just learn more about,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of things that I can help my clients with, because it's such a key piece, to
Mm-hmm.
setting goals. And how do we, when we get off track, how do we get back on track?
Yeah.
How, when you feel defeated in something that you didn't achieve, or it didn't go the way
Yeah.
you wanted, how do we get back to, just trying to
Yeah.
retry, do it again. How do I do it better this time? And I
Yeah.
think this journey is so all encompassing.
Yeah.
It's, we're telling you got to be, eating right. You got to be taking your vitamins and your fluids. And oh, by the way,
Yeah.
be positive the whole time, and move your body. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so many things. And I think that these, like the thing that you were just sharing, that wheel, I find that really helpful. That's like, just as
Mm.
you were talking about it, it gave
Mm-hmm.
me like a visual that I felt like was easy to understand. And sometimes for me, I just like to have little visuals. I was
Yeah.
always that kid in high school and stuff, on my teams, that would like give out quotes to people, like motivational quotes. I don't
Oh,
know if you
I
remember
love
the
it.
store
Oh, yeah.
does anyone remember the store accessories out there?
Oh, were
Did you
those
have
the ones on
did
the
you have
airplane?
no,
Yes, they were on the
oh yes, on the
airplanes.
magazines.
Yes, and
Yes.
because I used
Yes.
to, my parents were divorced, so I would fly back and
Oh,
forth
okay.
between them, and I would study
Oh,
those magazines
yes.
and read
Oh my
those.
God.
Yes,
I
yes,
love those positive, like they're positive affirmations, they're
yes.
quotes, they're motivational things. And that for
Mhm.
me, I was so sad, by the way, when Accessories went out of business, just side note. But I loved those quotes. And I think,
Yeah.
like what you're saying, which is, this is a journey, and there's so many pieces to it. And the mental aspect is so important because it
Mhm.
impacts all the other areas,
Mhm.
if you're
Mhm.
not feeling good about yourself, or how things are going, it's going to impact your ability to feel confident in your meal prepping, or what you're eating, or how you're moving your body, or how you're doing your job, how you're being your person, your family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's an all encompassing thing. Anyways, I wanted to just ask your thoughts on that, because I think, there are so many different things that folks can take away, especially from these podcasts, but that can just, one little thought in a day can really change your outlook on the whole day.
Yeah, absolutely. And
You know?
like I said earlier, like I feel like that first step, kind of breaking it down again, is that pause.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that pause will let you actually do it. Because if we don't pause and we just kind of move through it, then
Yeah.
you're going to miss the opportunity to have that. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's easier said than done. Always on, but
Yeah.
pausing is
So
helpful.
true. So true. Yeah. So one last question for you here,
Yeah.
before we kind of talk a little bit more about your business and things like that. Is there any advice that you have for someone that's had bariatric surgery and maybe just feels a little bit lost in their nutrition journey? Do you have any advice for that person?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would, after hearing this, I hope this person probably listened to what we just talked about. Like, I would
Yeah.
encourage you to, like, where do you want to start, right? Like, we've talked about the importance of your protein goals. We've talked about the importance of water, and I'm sure you talk about movement all the time on here. There's the importance of
Yes.
movement and meal planning. Like, where do you want to start? Like, what's a piece of that you feel vested in? And starting there. So,
Yep.
as far as kind of giving more of that you're a part of this. I would start with the one thing that you want to start with and the one thing you've been thinking about, start there and then layer it on. So, you were talking about layering earlier. I'm a big believer in like layering it, like,
Yes.
one story that I shared the other day in my membership was that I probably should do this on podcast actually, because it's a lot more people, that when COVID happened, and I had a baby during that time period, and like brushing my teeth was like a hard thing for me to do in the morning. Just got really out of that habit. And so
Tired.
I started
Sure.
with like just that, like, that's what you're going to do. That's going to be like your one thing, and then like it has nothing to do with nutrition, but it's self-care. And then starting with that, and then, working your way, towards like layering things on, then adding on your vitamins, and then adding on that protein at every meal. And those ones that you've already started are going to become more and more ingrained. And I think the simplest thing that you can do is the one that you like, is the one that is the one to start with, like the simplest thing that you want to do, because that's going to build your confidence. Like, I really wanted to brush my teeth again. So I wanted to do that. And so I'm like, I can do it. And like, I'm actually going to do it. And so it just like, this is something I can do. Okay. I got that done. All right. I'm doing really good on that. Okay. Now let's do this, let's
go.
Let's add this up. So, just layering it.
I like that. I was going to say, I can relate to that so much, because once I started working from home, it was like, oh, I can just wear what I want now. I don't have to go to work every day and dress up and wear my, nice business attire. I can wear what I want. But what I found for me was that it almost kind of correlated with like, because I wasn't just like, focused on, hey, I'm getting up, I'm taking a shower, I'm doing my hair, I'm going to put my nice clothes on. And kind of that gave me like a mental boost. And what I found was over time, especially during COVID, was that I was less motivated to do other things. And to what you're saying is, so my decision was, I got up, I was like, okay, I used to feel a lot better about my day when I would get up, take a shower, and put on, it doesn't have to be something fancy every day, but I don't need to be wearing my pajama pants and my, sweatpants, and so I'm very similar to you. It was like, okay, I'm going to start doing, I'm going to get up, I'm going to take a shower, I'm going to, dry my hair, and I'm going to put on, even if it's just jeans or nice pants, it was just one little thing that I could control, that was fully in my control. And it helped me turn around my day, because it just made me feel more productive. I don't know what that link was, but for me, it just totally helped. I don't know. So
exactly.
You never know.
And I think everyone has those, it's something different for everyone. So really kind of finding
100%.
what it is what is it for you? It's that self-care.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, tell us a little bit more. So we've talked a little bit about your membership, which is the Bariatric Meal Prep, and your website is bariatricmealprep.com. Can you tell us a little about how that developed and what it includes, so folks can learn a little bit more about it?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for that question. So the Bariatric Meal Prep Academy is a membership. So you can come and go as you please. Like, some people come for a month and then they want a month off and they come back. Like, that's kind of like, there's no like long-term obligation to join the Bariatric Meal Prep Academy. And when you join, you automatically have access to like my recipe database in there. There's over like 500 recipes and food items, and a personalized meal planner. So you can kind of you can make your own meal plans if you want. And then weekly, I provide a weekly meal plan. It's a 5-day meal plan. And there's 2 dinners, 2 lunches, 2 breakfasts, and 2 snacks each week in there. And then there's like a grocery list to go with it. But like, I really wanted this. I feel like recipes and meal planning are super important, but like, I feel that they're not everything. And so I really wanted to make sure that the nutrition education was in there, and to show you how you can do this on your own, kind of conversations how you and I, Kim, have been having. Like, it's really about like you applying it and figuring out what recipes work for you, what meal plans work for you. And so I teach you how to do that also in the program. And then you have access to me. And then I actually have another dietitian in there, Faith Flaherty, that she helps out as well with answering any questions that you have in regards to nutrition. You have a community in there. And then we do like weekly, not weekly, excuse me. We do challenges. I need to get them more on a schedule. I just completed our 3rd challenge. No, maybe it's our 4th.
That's awesome.
And so there's different challenges in there, to kind of keep your momentum going. And really the whole purpose, let me just put in, the purpose of it is to give you recipes, meal plans, and then support for you to be successful on your journey. And I'd love to have you join it. So it's really a great program. And each month you also get like a focus guide also to help your progress as well. So there's like a nutrition focus in there, a mindset focus. Like, we have sugar cravings this month. We've talked about the wheel of self-sabotage, like how to get out the wheel of self-sabotage. So kind of like these like little things that you with little worksheets included, so you can kind of progress progress you forward a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love all of that. That sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
You guys, please
It's been
check
a
it
lot of
out.
work. It's been a lot of,
Yeah.
a lot of love though. A lot of like love and effort has gone into it. And it's changed too. Like when it first came out, it was pretty much, you'd get like owning a PDF, with the meal plans. And now like we have the personalized planner where you can switch my meals out with meals that you want, create your own shopping list. So it's definitely like come a lot farther than it did and when it came out in October of 2022.
Sure. Yeah. My gosh. Well, it sounds like an amazing program and lots of resources, but really just good support, because I love that you have, dietitians like yourself and your colleague there that can be there to answer questions. Because sometimes it's like, okay, like, when folks sign up for like a course or something like that, it's like, okay, here's your course. Good luck to you. Have a good life.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, they have access to you and they can ask questions. And you said there's a community. I think that's so helpful.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to just say, oh, I don't understand this, help. You know what I mean? And that you have someone that's there to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I did like, I used to have like different courses and stuff, but they were always live. So we did like weekly Q&As. The membership has monthly Q&As, but you can still get your questions answered like anytime in the actual like community. But I really felt like that support was what's needed. I didn't want to just put out, I actually used to sell my meal plans just individually, but I don't know. I just feel like there needs to be more support than just a meal plan in there, which is why the membership came about. So
yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, awesome. Awesome. And can you tell us where people can find you, whether that's your website, your social media? Can you tell us?
Yeah. So bariatricmealprep.com is the website that you can learn about like the membership. I have different like recipes on there. And I also have the Bariatric Symposium on there if you want to sign up for next year's, which Kim has presented at and hopefully will again. So the bariatricmealprep.com. And then I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Pinterest. And I'm all bariatric.meal.prep. So you can find me on there.
All those. Okay. And I'm going to link those in the show notes here so folks can just go right down. I will link you to all those accounts. And that way it'll be easy for folks to find you and then they can reach out to you for questions or anything like that.
Okay. So, wonderful. Yay. Thank you so much for having me, Kim. This has been so much fun.
I am just so glad that you came on. And like I said, I love having other dietitians on because I think we can kind of talk shop. And like you and I were saying ahead of time, sometimes it's not the most glamorous recommendations that are the most impactful, because these are the actual behaviors and the nutrition recommendations that actually work. And so, they're not the spectacular, shiny, flashy lights, news, fad diet that works. They don't work, and the establishing the nutrition basics is what actually works. And then building from there as to your individual goals. But I love that you reiterated all those things. It sounds like you and I have a pretty similar philosophy on most things.
Yes. Sure. I think we do. I always appreciate your work. I was so happy when you came, I think maybe you reached out to me first, or maybe I found you. I couldn't remember, but either way, I was like, oh my gosh, we need a bariatric sports dietitian, because I felt like there was none at the time, at least that I noticed, or that was online, to be able to fulfill that need, because it's such a need, because it's so many moving parts. I mean, bariatric surgery in itself is already moving parts, let alone like adding on,
100%.
An endurance, an endurance sport. So.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I appreciate you. And thank you so much. Thanks for coming on today. I hope everyone, please give Kristin a follow. Yay. She's got wonderful, wonderful resources. And just thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Yeah,
I'll see you soon.
You will. Absolutely. I'll be on there just messaging you all the time, But you guys, you can watch the full video of this podcast episode on my YouTube channel, the Active Bariatric Nutrition channel. So please make sure to subscribe to it. Give it a like. That way you'll know when we upload a new video. And also, if you wouldn't mind, just share this podcast with maybe one or two people that you think would find this information helpful, because what we are trying to do is share that evidence-backed information to as many people as we can, and really just help someone out there that might need to hear the information that you're getting today. So if you don't mind sharing and giving the podcast a review, that would help it get out in front of more people. And then if you would like to follow me on my social media, my account is on Instagram. It's Active Bariatric. I also have a Facebook and TikTok channel. And if you would like to learn more about my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services, please go to my website, which is activebariatricnutrition.com, and schedule a free discovery call so we can learn more about each other. So I appreciate you guys being here today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will do this again next week. Take care, everybody.